Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I'm your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy podcast studio. And we were super excited to have Dr. Erica Crafts on our show today to talk about sexual health and pelvic floor. She had a situation that came up where she couldn't be on the podcast. She is going to reschedule. But Janet and I love this topic. We talk about this topic all day long when it comes to hormones. So we will discuss as a pharmacist how we can help with sexual health and pelvic floor. And then later on, Erica will join us in a few months probably to talk about what a physical therapist does. So Janet, tell us a little bit about sexual health and pelvic floor, what you know as a pharmacist.
Well, usually we start talking to clients after giving birth. That's probably the first time we might have an interaction, but it could start really sneaking up on people with just urinary tract infections, vaginal dryness, just tender tissue atrophy. And usually it's pretty easy to address, but it can creep in and become a problem. And a lot of times, women are going into their doctor or their gynecologist, and usually how they're addressing it is just symptomatic at the time. So if it's UTIs, they just treat them with antibiotics and maybe recommend things like lubrication. But it could be this first sign of lower hormones, especially once we started having babies and as we age.
And there is a thought that um, as we age, that sex isn't as important. And I will tell you, it's just as important no matter what age you are. So if you go to a doctor and they say, well, sex just isn't as important anymore. So if you're having erectile dysfunction as a man, or you're having vaginal dryness as a woman, or sex is painful, and a doctor says that, well, sex just isn't as important as we age, then it's time to get a new doctor.
I agree with that statement. And I could back up a little bit earlier in this too with our age group, because many women are put on birth control pills early in life. So we could be putting in you a synthetic estrogen that's actually putting you in a early menopause, and that can really change just your physical dynamics, your mental state as far as having any libido, as far as dryness. It could start really early in our age, because when we start giving people synthetic estrogens in the birth control pills or even the IUDs, we can really change the balance of your natural hormones and what your ovaries are able to produce. So that could be a problem very early on. And we see that quite often. In fact, sometimes we'll have labs sent to us from providers and they want us to adjust somebody's hormones. And libido might be the first thing that they're talking about, but we really have to get you off those synthetic estrogens in order to help you with other hormones. Because if you're in a suppressed state where your ovaries aren't working, just throwing some normal hormones at you is just not going to work.
And what Janet is meaning about with IUDs, mostly the Marina IUD is very popular. It's a progestin IUD, not progesterone. They're created way different. So synthetic progestin. So it's synthetic progestins and synthetic estrogens that are hormonal birth control. And we would never ever recommend those drugs, because we see the short term and the long term consequences of those drugs, whether it be short term depression, anxiety, insomnia, long-term infertility, all kinds of issues, long-term, irregular bleeding later on. Anytime, especially with some of the implants, whether it be or the Depo-Provera shot.
Right.
I mean, anytime there's something you implant into your body for 5 years that slowly releases a synthetic progestin into your body, it can be good. or anytime you give a shot and it lasts for 90 days for birth control, we'll see women years later after they remove those from their body, and they're still having issues getting pregnant, infertility and miscarriages.
So how that can affect your pelvic floor is pretty straightforward, because when you go into perimenopause or menopause, you just stop producing as much testosterone that you normally would. So those muscles that are in that actual area are starting to atrophy, and they're not as strong, and they're not being replaced as they used to be. And that can be true of the bladder as well. The bladder has a sphincter that requires hormones. So if you are having leakage, recurrent UTIs, if you're having problems with the pelvic floor, it could be a lack of testosterone, because that hormone helps to rebuild tissue, especially our muscle. And there's several muscle groups that are really important for that area to keep us in a healthy tissue balance.
And there are, of course, we're talking from a pharmacist standpoint, but there are certain exercises you can do to help strengthen those muscles. And when we have Erica back on, she will give her expertise as a physical therapist to talk about what physical therapists do to help support those women. But also men, don't forget that, let's not leave men out of this conversation. So as men age, there can be issues too. There can be issues with erectile dysfunction. And, many times when we talk about pelvic floor issues, erectile dysfunction can be, it can be a vascular issue. So if you're not metabolically healthy, you might have erectile dysfunction from decreased perfusion to that area. One of the ways to help that is to, be ideal body weight, eat better, exercise, especially cardiopulmonary, what they call cardio exercise, to help increase circulation to your extremities.
It's really important to note too that in a man, erectile dysfunction could be the first sign of cardiovascular disease. It is possible to reverse this, of course, with diet and exercise and good lifestyle activities, but it can be the first symptom that you're having cardiovascular problems. So that needs to be addressed too. But it also could be if you already are having a chronic illness or a uh, pers- uh, chronic illness at this disease state is what I'm looking for, the word. And you're on medications. Some of the medications cause this dysfunction just because of the side effect of those drugs.
Yeah, specifically what she's referring to are blood pressure medications. There are many blood pressure medications. In fact, I'm not going to say all of them, but many blood pressure medications can cause erectile dysfunction, or it can cause other sexual dysfunction like problems with orgasm. Um, so one of the best things to do is not change medications, but reverse your blood pressure problem. But also antidepressants. A lot of the antidepressants cause sexual dysfunction.
For men and women.
Yes, it can cause decreased libido. It can cause orgasm issues. So the best thing for that too is not change drugs, but to get off antidepressants. That's a class of drugs that Janet and I would never recommend long term. The best antidepressant ever invented is exercise, far and beyond what any drug could do.
Right. And so when we think of pharmacy, you think of big pharma, but alcohol can be one of those drugs or things that can cause this from both men and women. If you think about it, it depresses your body, so it's going to shorten the signals that your body would receive in different places, like our brain. So that can be a problem, as well as marijuana. We talk about that quite often in different podcasts, but anything that's going to depress your CNS or your mind or your brain can cause that. Can you think of something else?
Well, and it's not just those drugs. I mean, alcohol and marijuana are both seen as depressants. So central nervous system, it makes our brain, it just calms us down, makes our brain calm down, and that's not necessarily good for sexual health. On the flip side, some of the amphetamines or cocaine, typically drugs that are abused, they're not good for sexual function either. not necessarily because of it's necessarily more orgasm type issues, and erectile dysfunction is what those drugs can cause, along with a myriad of problems later on, obviously. So just stay away from drugs that affect your brain if you want to have good sex. Those are just the facts.
So let's jump into exercise a little bit because I think for women, this is something that even even as we age, we need to address this a little bit. And this is something I think a physical therapist would probably agree with us. But we were just speaking with a hormone provider last week in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and one of the things that Mary reminded us of is that either you use it or lose it. And what she's talking about, especially for women, that as we age, that we should address if we're having atrophy of our tissue. And that even includes it's going to affect our bladder as well as our vaginal tissue. Because as you atrophy, the tissue becomes less pliable. So you do need to address that. And that's where hormones and physical therapy can help that tissue so it's not always becoming smaller and less pliable.
And I mean, the same goes for men too. Use it or lose it. So if you're not having regular sex and having regular erections, then it's going to be more and more difficult to perform and to maintain or even get an erection if you don't have one regularly. So that's why Jan and I often say, and we say over and over again, um, regular healthy people have regular sex, and regular sex keeps us healthy. Those are just facts.
So let's talk about a few things that we already kind of mentioned testosterone for women, but estriol actually is very beneficial, and estradiol is for women locally. Those two hormones help out. You want to jump on that a little bit, Shawn?
Yeah, so when she's talking about estriol and estradiol, those are two estrogens that our bodies make up. Yes, men make up estrogen also. Um, and women, if they use those cream, you can make it up in a cream, and it can help for local type symptoms of, vaginal atrophy, vaginal dryness, to prevent urinary tract infections, to prevent urinary incontinence. One of our most popular prescriptions at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy is estriol vaginal cream. I like estriol specifically if you're looking at it for just treating local symptoms, because it's more specific to bladder and vaginal tissue and doesn't have some of the systemic effects that estradiol does. Not that estradiol is bad. It's just that if you're looking for local issues, I like the estriol vaginal cream, and it's very, very affordable.
I agree with that. So let's jump onto the guy side again. We talked about exercise being very helpful, but there are hormones like DHEA and testosterone, and then there are some pharmaceuticals like Viagra and Cialis. So let's kind of cover those real quick.
For erectile dysfunction, well, first of all, a sign of low testosterone for a man is if a man doesn't have good libido, then that's a sign of low testosterone. It's either a sign of low testosterone or they're on drugs that are affecting their brain where they don't feel like having sex, or there's some kind of depression or something else going on. Either way, it's usually a lifestyle created. It's usually lifestyle created because men are supposed to have good libido. That being said, so should women. And same goes for women. Mostly women are maybe not going to have as high as libido as men, but if their hormones are balanced appropriately and in the right relationship, they definitely can. So when it comes to, so men should have, a good libido. If they don't, they need their testosterone levels checked and they need to be optimal. If they have other low testosterone symptoms, which could be like erectile dysfunction, depression, apathy, not being as competitive and they used to be competitive, those are all signs of low testosterone. So get your testosterone checked by somebody that knows about hormones, and they're not just going to look at a normal level, they're going to look at an optimal level. But if there is some erectile dysfunction, then there are some drugs like Viagra and Cialis and Levitra, and those are called phosphodiesterase inhibitors. They literally are vasodilators. They help to increase nitric oxide production, which is a vasodilator, and that's how they help for erectile dysfunction. The Viagra is this was the first one that came out. I think Cialis was second, Levitra was third. Of all the three, I like Cialis. The generic name is Tadalafil, and it kind of follows some weird pharmacokinetics, which most drugs that work fast also don't work for very long, but Tadalafil is an exception to that. It works the fastest and the longest of all of them. So many people can get away with taking, 20 to 30 milligrams of Cialis or Tadalafil twice a week, and it will help with their erectile dysfunction. Again, make sure that everything else is healthy. Make sure there's not a cardiovascular issue going on, because the capillaries in the penis are smaller than the capillaries in the heart. So you will have erectile dysfunction before you'll have a heart attack. I think the capillaries in the penis are 3 millimeters and the capillaries in the heart are 4 millimeters. So it could be a sign of cardiovascular disease if you are having erectile dysfunction.
So there are some over-the-counter things that get brought up every once in a while to help with blood flow. L-arginine comes to mind. There's some products I think that have nitric oxide. Um, and then too, there could be some physical things like, if you have a job that requires you to like ride a horse or ride a bike, there could be some physical restraints on that. It's not long term, but if there's anything that's causing you to have less circulation, that should be something to kind of think about. But the good news is exercise and healthy weight and lifestyle, definitely, as well as balancing hormones for men. It's pretty straightforward for them.
Well, and also it's an overall health issue. So it's not just a physical issue with circulation. It can be a mental issue also,
Sure.
obviously. So if you're depressed, if you're not in a good relationship, you might not have that stimulation, appropriate stimulation to cause an erection. So realize that the answer is just not a drug, and it might not be a physical problem. There's other issues too. I mean, erectile dysfunction is a multifaceted problem. So, when Jan and I get those questions from a man, you got to really, dive down into it. It's not just about giving a drug and fixing the entire issue. Um, Also, poor sleep can cause erectile dysfunction.
Mm,
Over exercising can cause
mhm.
erectile dysfunction. So, realize that if you're too stressed out, which there's many different forms of stress. We think of stress, as just mental stuff from our jobs today. But realize too, if you over exercise, you can have erectile dysfunction, and you might not even have a high libido because your body tells
Mhm.
yourself like, wait a minute, I am fatigued out. I don't really need to have sex right now because that's going to be even more exhausting. So realize you can overtrain, overexercise, and that can cause some of those problems. Or you can also be eating a bad diet. And it also means whether it be poor diet from overeating too much crap or under eating, being too calorically restricted, like when you're doing a hard cut or you're losing weight, it can cause the same kind of issues.
So the hardest I think to treat isn't the pharmaceutical side or the PT side. I think it probably would be more the lifestyle of your emotions and dealing with that. Because if you are in a state of stress, like Shawn's talking about, whether it be you over exercised or whether you're just not handling stress in your life, likelihood you're not sleeping as well. So if your cortisol levels are super high, that can be a problem. So your body's always in a state of stress. So you're always in this flight mode and you want to run and you can't calm down. So those are things that you have to find something in your life to help deal with that. And every person's different how that looks. So managing our stress, whether it's our job, our families, or our own stress that we put on ourselves, can affect your sexual life because if you're always in a state of flight, ready to run, your body's not going to calm down, and so that's something that's probably one of the hardest things to address.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Um, let's see, what else can we talk about as far as hormones go, Dan? Let's talk about DHEA a little bit.
Oh yeah.
We're talking about stress. So
Right. So DHEA is a hormone. It is sold over the counter for most prescriptions. We might compound a vaginal cream or maybe combine it with some testosterone, but most of the time it's over the counter. And it's made by our adrenal gland, and it is something that is kind of overlooked a little. It's supposed to support our other hormones, specifically our testosterone. But if our DHA is too low, it kind of can look at our adrenal function not being as healthy as well as our brain function. But these hormones all kind of play together, so it's like playing music. You have to have them all in the right balance. So if you're a male and you don't have enough DHEA, it can affect your cardiovascular health, your brain health, as well as your testosterone levels.
Yeah, and DHEA does convert somewhat to testosterone. I wouldn't take it solely to convert to testosterone, especially in anyone that's over 40. Sometimes in a younger person, you might get away with some DHEA that will convert to testosterone enough. But mostly, if a man's over 40 and they need testosterone, they also need DHEA. It goes hand in hand. And yeah, like Janet says, it's an oral capsule over the counter, very affordable. It helps us respond to stress. It can help for energy, help for mood. DHEA is a wonderful thing, and it's very, very
It's overlooked a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
It's overlooked a lot. And anything that really supports your adrenal function is super important because that's going to have power over whether you're going to respond to stress in your life. And that's something that's, we need to manage. So, and then, I kind of touched on cardiovascular health and brain health. And usually what we see is a decline as we age. So we want those to be very healthy. Now, if it's too high, it might cause acne and some problems there. Not so much in males, I don't see it, but every once in a while in females.
And Janet was talking about the DHEA cream. That is something that we do compound up, and it's something that we use as an alternative for vaginal health. If they can't use testosterone or estrogen for whatever reason. So we make up a DHA cream, and it's great for vaginal atrophy, vaginal dryness. It works wonders. Is it possibly because DHA converts into testosterone, which then testosterone converts into estradiol? Possibly, but we do know that DHEA works. We know it well enough. The FDA knows it because there's a commercially available product on the market that's a suppository that came out a few years ago. And of course, Compound Farms have been making these kind of things for decades,
Yeah.
and we knew it worked. So um, uh, there's actually a product on the market for it now. And of course, it's big pharma, so it's incredibly expensive. So we make a cream that's a lot more affordable.
So, last, I kind of want to talk about metabolic health because most disease states and illnesses are really wrapped around that concept. And basically, we kind of touched on it, like Shawn was talking about junk food. But really, what we mean is sugar. Too much sugar in our body doesn't know how to respond at the cellular level. So, we're always in the state of insulin resistance and we're stressed. And so, that's something that's pretty easy to fix. It's increasing your protein in healthy foods. If it doesn't rot, don't eat it.
Yeah, and realize that sugar gets vilified, um, but realize that the main fuel in our bodies that we burn, the main thing the cell lives off of is glucose. Now, the keto people will hate me for saying that, but glucose, we will die without zero glucose, and glucose in our blood is a monosaccharide. It's a simple sugar. It's a monosaccharide. We will die without a zero glucose. We will not die necessarily without ketones in our body, although we probably have a few ketones floating around all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean we're in ketosis. So sugar gets vilified, and I think it's partly because we do eat too much of it, and usually it's in a processed form in a box, and that can be a big problem. But sugar is in all plants have sugar. It's just basically the way photosynthesis works. It creates carbohydrates, so humans can't eat them. Um, and it's not that we have to have them to survive, but let's not vilify sugar. And I mean, a good example is yesterday, Jan and I did a fairly intense bike ride, and I burned just conservatively 4,200 calories in a little over 5 hours. Guess what I was consuming the entire time? Yes, sugar water. And I mean, I wasn't going to be eating steak and drinking oil for all you keto people out there. So I was mostly fueling with sugar type items. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not metabolically healthy because I was eating a lot of sugar, because I was burning it. Does that mean I drink sugar water on the days that I don't have rides like that? No, I don't. I mean, the only time I drink sugar water like that is when I have a race and, longer intensities, and longer durations. So just realize that if you're burning the sugar, it's not bad. And did Jen and I eat some sugar afterwards? Of course we did. I drank actually a couple Cokes. Yes, sugared Cokes. I didn't think it was going to kill me because I, only consumed like 1,200 calories and I burnt 4,000. So, let's not vilify sugar. But like Janet says, if it doesn't rot, don't eat it. Don't eat it out of a box. Eat simple ingredient stuff in general. But there are times that you have to deviate from that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I think we need to realize too that we are empowered some of these changes, that some of these things we do in our lifestyle really don't cost that much. They're really easy to do, getting the right sleep, exercise, and improving your diet. And start with one thing and work at it, and make a goal, make it really easy. I think sometimes we make issues a problem by making it so much bigger than it really is. But small changes make big hinges on doors swing, right? So,
Small hinges swing
okay,
big
thank
doors.
you for correcting me. Appreciate that. Anyways, my point is that some of these things may feel very overwhelming, but there usually is a solution, whether we come back to exercise or going to a PT or adjusting or managing or optimizing hormones as we age. There's usually solutions. And so our sexual health does not have to be something that we don't address with our providers. I think it's something we don't talk to our doctors and practitioners about enough. And men are probably a little bit more open with their doctors, but women sometimes feel like they should just have to live with it or they're embarrassed. But when you go into your provider, have a conversation about, is this right? Is this appropriate? Should I feel like this? I've noticed this or that, and be your own advocate.
Absolutely. And as we wind this podcast up, I just want to thank all the listeners and viewers for tuning in over the last 5.5 years. We are going in on episodes almost 600 here shortly, and we could not do it without our listeners and viewers. We have an incredible following, and please follow us on Facebook, share it. Facebook, we stream live on Facebook, we stream live on YouTube, we stream live on Rumble, we stream live on X and on LinkedIn. So find us on those platforms, share it, subscribe to it. We're obviously in all the podcast forums too, Apple, Spotify, all those podcasts, Google Play. And we've got no plans on stopping anytime soon. Our podcast is really, our goal is to educate and empower individuals to take charge of their own health. I wrote a book about that in 2019. Our podcast has helped promote that book, but it's called Sickened: How the Government Ruined Healthcare and How to Fix It. And the first fix in chapter 6, which is a 6-step solution on how to fix our healthcare system, is ultimately the consumer needs to be charged of their own health.
Yep.
That's what's going to fix our healthcare system. There is no government that's going to fix it. There is no insurance company that's going to fix it. There's no law. There's no politician. There's no lobbying group that's going to fix it. Ultimately, it's got to come from you. You're the one that can fix your health. So ultimately, you don't need to go into the healthcare system. Janet, how do you want to end up?
Oh, yay. I agree with that. In fact, that's one of the whole reasons we did this podcast and do some of the things that we do, is just to empower people so they feel like they can take charge of their own health. And the more we do that, the more freedom we have. And I want people to thrive, not just exist, because I don't feel like it's any fun being out there and you're just going from day to day without enjoying life. So do the best you can, take it one day at a time, make small goals,
Simple stuff.
and yep, and you can do it.
And we don't stream live on Instagram because it doesn't let us, at least not on this platform. We do a live on Instagram, Q&A with the Pharmacist, every Thursday at 3 p.m. So we'll keep doing those. And one of the reasons why we started those is because we had a few videos go viral on Instagram. One of them has 3.5 million views. One of them has 1.5 million views. And it basically started with what drugs we would not recommend as pharmacists. And that's really resonating with people. So we kept that going, and we basically put out a new video every day, and then we do a live Q&A on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram, and please ask questions and tune into our Q&A. So that about covers it for today's episode. Tune in Thursday to our midweek scheduled podcast, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You've been watching and listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you.